What's up and welcome back to the Critics Initiative Phase 2, where I've invited my good old buddy Anthony A. PEREZ to once again join me on my channel to discuss his assigned franchise, Thor. In the film that introduced the Reality Stone, not that they called it that in this film, which they actually called the Ether, which, I kind of like that. But today, we're talking about Thor, the Dark World. Thor, the Dark World, or just Thor 2 in some circles, is a 2013 film directed by Alan Taylor, and it once again features the recognizable faces such as Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Tom Hiddleston, Anthony Hopkins, Christopher Eccleston, Kat Dennings, and many more. It focuses on Thor, who is soon scheduled to be King of Asgard, an event that he has to put in the back of his mind as Jane Foster is possessed by something called the Ether, a substance that'll end up killing her if they don't act now. And to make things a little bit worse, a group of evil dark elves show up wanting to take the Ether and turn the universe dark, a threat so big that Thor may have to enlist the help of his good old brother Loki. Alright, so before we begin, I'm going to give a big shout out and thanks to Anthony for joining me on another Thor adventure. We'll be hearing what he has to say about the Dark World in just a hot second! But first, I'll just have to lay out a few of my positives for this film, which, just like Iron Man 3, is considered to be among the worst of the MCU films, period. I don't exactly agree with that. It has its issues, of course, but I specifically remember walking out of the theater with this film thinking that it was better than the first. And to a degree, I still agree with that sentiment, but it's mostly because I was never a huge fan of the Thor character, and because all his individual movies are so different from one another, it almost felt like they didn't quite know what they wanted to do with him. Until Ragnarok, that is, but that's another talk show. The Dark World, to me, was always interesting because we didn't have to introduce the world to Thor anymore. We met him, we got acquainted with who he was, who his family was, the Asgardian tales that are associated with his character, all that. So now we just kind of get to see him in his prime in a fun yet pretty traditional action superhero film. The positives that I have for this film really come down to the stuff going on down on Earth. Anthony is more of a fan, I think, of the Asgard stuff, but I really like the science fiction portal stuff going on down on Earth, where people and things and stuff are bouncing from universe to universe throughout these portals, and Selvig's hilarious side story about running around naked because he had a god scramble his brain in the Avengers, and especially the stuff with the Ether, or what we will soon come to know as the Reality Stone. Lots of really awesome visuals with that, and I really enjoyed the banter between Thor and Loki in this film. I have never really been a massive fan of Loki in the movies. I think that he's mostly overused. I'm annoyed at how many fake deaths that he runs into throughout all these movies. I much prefer the Disney Plus show, but there are some really good brotherly moments in this film, which again, Anthony is gonna be talking about in his portion, and just know that I definitely agree with what he has to say about that. Also, Christopher Eccleston, I love that he was in this movie and what he brought to that role of Malekith. More on that later, but like Anthony, I'm a big fan of his, mostly because of how he played the Ninth Doctor in Doctor Who, which restarted that show's popularity altogether. Now, before I talk about a few problematic things going on with this film, stick around for that, I want to hear what Anthony has to say about Thor, the Dark World. So take it away, man.
What's going on, Dave and all his viewers? Thank you so much, my friend, for having me here in another video. This time around to talk about Thor, the Dark World, the sequel to Thor, and the first Thor film after the original Avengers film. It's crazy to think about how much time has passed since this movie's come out, but a big thanks to you, my friend, for having me on, and a big thanks to all of you guys watching this video for sticking around for my portion, for Dave's portion, and subscribe to Dave's channel. Come on, what are you doing? So, Thor, the Dark World, it's a movie that gets a lot of crap. And at this point, Dave's already told you what the plot is and who's in the movie and who directed it and all that jazz. And so I'm going to get straight into my thoughts. This is a movie that gets way too much crap and is a movie that is often kind of put within the bubble of the worst films in the MCU. And I definitely have criticisms, don't get me wrong, but I honestly enjoy a lot about this film. Now, let's talk about the biggest downfall of this film, and that is the very just generic story here. You have a villain who wants to come and destroy the world, conquer the world. He wants power, and he has to seek a thing so he can do so, and then he ends up getting it for a little bit, and then danger is there, and then, the hero comes in and stops him, and then it's over. We've seen it before. The villain in this movie is very one note, the character of Malekith, and I'm not gonna lie, that broke my heart. The first time I saw the movie, I didn't mind it so much. On subsequent viewings afterwards, for sure, was super apparent to me, very generic villain approach. But I do really enjoy what Christopher Eccleston, the actor who plays Malekith, brings to the role. I was already a big fan of his from some other TV and stuff that I had seen, but most notably Doctor Who, as he played the Ninth Doctor. I really thoroughly enjoyed him in that role. And so it was nice to see him here as Malekith. I think the makeup and the redesign of the character from the comics to this was really cool, and I really thoroughly enjoy his look, his feel, his vibe, his voice throughout the course of the film. But there's no getting around it. They gave him a generic villain story. But outside of that, what I really enjoy about this film, really at the heart of it, is the amount of time we get to spend in Asgard and how much this film really establishes for Thor and Loki moving forward, as things like Ragnarok and the Loki TV show and the Avengers films and the other films that just in general have featured these characters. I think that there's so much about this film that has really informed where it would go, that sometimes I feel isn't really necessarily credited to this film. One of my favorite parts about this film is really diving deeper into that brotherhood between Thor and Loki. Tom Hiddleston and Chris Hemsworth do a fantastic job playing these characters, because now they've had two films before this that they've, been able to kind of dive deeper into who these characters are, have a lot more screen time, really flesh them out a lot more. And by the time you get to Thor: The Dark World, they, know who these characters are a little bit more. They feel more comfortable in these roles. And there are moments between the two of them that are just bantering or, kind of working through situations together or just talking about things in general that I really enjoy. I really enjoy the brotherhood between Thor and Loki in this film. I think it's way stronger in this film than it was in the first film, because in the first film, as much as I enjoy a lot about that movie, it pretty much is jealous brother wants the throne from the brother who is going to get the throne, and jealous brother is going to do what he can to be the ruler, and they still love each other, but there's this, struggle, this animosity between the two. And, we get that fake out that Loki is dead. And then, of course, he shows up later on in the post-credit scene. And then he shows up in Avengers and all that jazz. And here he is now. And I really thoroughly enjoy just seeing the journey of these characters that really plays off of this movie. One of my favorite moments in the entirety of anything dealing with Loki is a moment in this movie where both Thor and Loki have just kind of had a tragedy happen in their lives, and Thor goes to visit Loki, who is imprisoned after the events of Avengers on Asgard. And what I really love about this sequence is he goes to see Loki after this tragedy has happened. And Loki is just acting cocky, unbothered. And Chris Hemsworth gives this great performance as he pretty much just tells Loki to, cut the facade. And then Loki, inside of his cell, lets the illusion down. And instead of us seeing him all prim and proper and cocky and snooty, we actually see that his jail cell is just a mess, and he's on the floor looking disheveled, and that he's been crying for the longest time. He looks like he's completely broken and torn. And it's moments like this for me that have really humanized the character of Loki. It's moments like this that really fleshed out who Thor and Loki would be. And being so far into the MCU at this point and having such amazing moments between these two as time would go on, and the beloved nature of who these characters are, I feel like there's so much about who these characters would later be that is set up in this movie and the time that they spend together. And so, yeah, though this movie does have a generic story, I think there are so many moments in this movie that really are gems in the overall character development of Thor and Loki. Now, outside of that, yeah, there's definitely a lot of generic elements, but, I really enjoy the action of this film as well. I think it's a visually cool film. I really enjoy the look, the feel, the vibe. The score of the film is really great. And overall, again, this is a movie with a fairly generic story that has a lot of side characters that don't really give a whole lot to do or aren't given a whole lot to do. But when it comes to Thor and Loki and the moments between them, there's so much heart, emotion, and the sense of stakes is really heightened, I feel, in this one when it comes to the two of them versus the last film. So that's going to be my thoughts on Thor: The Dark World. A big thanks to Dave for having me here in this video. I'll go ahead and pass the floor back to him. And yeah, let's hear the rest of your thoughts, my friend.
Thank you to Anthony for joining me in yet another review. If you haven't yet, I implore everybody to go ahead, check out Anthony's channel. I've left a link to that in my description box below for y'all to check out. He has a lot of consistent reviews for newer films, a lot of which are on movies that have yet to be released. Super cool guy, super laid back reviews, and not as rigid as mine. Anyway, I have to say, I think I mostly agree with everything that Anthony had to say. We don't have really any major disagreements about this film because we both in general enjoy it and find it to be a good time. But nothing much in comparison to a lot of the other stuff that the MCU has rolled out since then. And I think that its absolute biggest downfall is definitely the story and these dark elves that, you know, they look scary enough, they act scary enough, they even sound scary enough. But I never fully understood what they were trying to do or why. And that's a massive part of the movie. They're essentially a cult trying to get this superpower which will return the universe to a state of darkness, or whatever that means. But why? What's the point of that? What's their drive? What good will that do for them? What did they get out of it? I honestly don't know, but it seemed to kind of overlook that. And there wasn't a lot of focus on it, like say with Thanos. I mean, you understood Thanos completely, as any good villain should be written. This one, I think that they just wanted more action and fun visuals, and for you to just not question the motives of the villain. But because I do, I'm not as invested in the film as I normally would be with others. But let's go ahead and look at my final rating for a second. So a B+ letter grade, score of 83%. You know, most of you will think that that's really, really high, but I think that's mostly because you're approaching this as an MCU film, which in 2022 is just, it's bigger than anything that anybody could have ever imagined. And you're not taking it as a movie on its own, which was made really well. No, it doesn't have the most investing story ever, but it does have a lot of great character growth moments, chemistry between a few leads, good performances, crazy amazing visuals at times, strong action, funny quips. It feels like a big movie. And based off of what it did and how it did it, I can't not praise it for all these little things. So 83% is fair in my mind. But guys, I have to hear your thoughts about this film in the comments down below. Do you think the critics got it right? Do you think it's one of the worst MCU films to date? Why or why not? And don't forget to jump over on Anthony's channel to check out all that he has to offer and to subscribe to all his consistent, way more consistent than my videos. He's worth it, guys, and again, a big reason why the Critics Initiative is even possible in the first place. So give him a look-see. Now, the next review in the Critics Initiative should be a lot of everybody's favorite film in the MCU all around. It's Captain America: The Winter Soldier. So don't miss out on that, guys. Make sure that you hit that subscribe button and bell to be notified when I drop that. And until then, peace out.